Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome into the stream. We're just going to hang out for a bit. Good to see everybody. Just wanted to provide some opportunity to come in and ask me anything. Ham radio related, of course. So just finishing up the workday here. And again, wanted to come out and see what people had going on. Super warm for us right now. Hopefully you guys are a lot cooler than we are because it is steamy, and I think it's only going to get worse from what I understand. I think they're saying high temperatures here like 100 some degrees. Feels like 105, 106, which for Minnesota, that's awfully warm. I mean, if you live down south, you're maybe a little bit used to it, but we're not used to that here in Minnesota. I've been doing some stuff around the shack earlier this morning. I've been playing around with the Spectrum Analyzer. You don't have one of these are super cool. So I said I'm testing out some radios and seeing if they're dirty or clean, what the harmonics look like. What's up, Dean? Yeah, I am outside of Minneapolis. I am in the northwest suburbs of Minneapolis, a city called Maple Grove, Minnesota. That's where I'm at. So about 20 air miles northwest of downtown Minneapolis. Yeah, that's the stuff here today. What are you up to out there? I've also been playing around with that new Pi-Star dashboard. Maybe you saw the video. I just dropped it, was it last night? I think it was last night. About the new Pi-Star, which is created by a fellow Minnesota ham, W0CHP. He did a great job on that. So if you're like a digital voice user, if you use Pi-Star on a hotspot, it's a pretty cool fork to Pi-Star. I love it. It's got so many great features and additions. It's awesome. So if you didn't see that video, check that out. 86 in Los Angeles and beautiful. Oh boy, that sounds like really nice. What are we at now right here? We are currently we were at 89. We're at 84 right now just because we actually got some rain in the area. We just had a brief little rain shower come through, which we could use it. We're in a drought, a pretty bad drought right now. Here in the Twin Cities, my grass is costing me a small fortune in water to stay green. So, yeah, we would love some rain. All right, around Albert Lea, of course, yeah, right. The last civilization you come through before you go to Iowa. Yeah, we often stop at. There's a big truck stop in Albert Lea. I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it's a travel center, whatever that definition is, but that's where the electric vehicle chargers are. So we stop in Albert Lea at that travel center often, right off the interstate there. 98 in North Texas. Oh boy. And let me guess, it probably feels a whole lot warmer than that because you guys got all that great humidity, which you're about to be pumping up to us here in the next couple of days here. And again, we're supposed to have heat indices probably around 105, 106. Air temperature is about 100. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So it's going to get hot. And believe me, there are people up here in Minnesota that don't have air conditioning, believe it or not. Like, there are people like that. So when it gets like this, it gets to be pretty brutal for them. Let it go brown. Yeah, I would love to let it go brown. Unfortunately, I think my neighbors would give me the stink eye, Thor, because I think they'd be staring at me and wondering why I let my yard go. Because I kind of get that feeling, and sometimes, like, I have neighbors around me and I have the antennas, and I don't even have anything that atrocious for antennas yet. I still got to get up that hex beam this summer. I just have my vertical on a mast and a couple of wires and a small Yagi, and I still get the looks from the neighbors. Haven't been on POTA spots. No, I have not been on POTA recently, and there's a reason for that. I think I talked about it on Twitter. I actually had a squirrel chew through my support rope on my dipole. So we had some squirrels that had babies here in the yard, and they are very busy, and they decided to chew through my nylon rope. So I had my dipole come down about a week and a half ago now, and I just haven't had a chance. I've been busy with family stuff to get the drone up and put my support rope back up on the northwest side of the property. So that is on the schedule. Give him a stink eye right back, Thor. I do, believe me. The challenge is that, my neighborhood, there's some big houses around me here in the neighborhood, and, everyone kind of looks at each other to be like, make sure everything looks nice. I mean, my wife was afraid to put in a garden because it would be visible from the street, and she's putting in like a 4 or 5 foot by 3 foot garden rectangle with like custom wood, like fencing with like chicken wire fence to keep the deer away from it, because we have lots of animals here. We live butted up to a protected wetland. And she's like, well, what if the neighbors see it? Because you can see it from the street. But yeah, we have some big houses here, like $1.5 million that are right down the street here. So everyone stares at everybody's yards, and you got to keep up with everybody else. But yeah. So the drone thing is going to happen, though. I got to get that antenna back up, because otherwise, yeah, I'm usually out doing POTA. I mean, I'm typically on HF at least for minimum 30 minutes to an hour every day at some point. I'm going through withdrawals. I had been listening to my STR online. That's how I'm getting my fix right now. What's up, Eric? Hopefully your day is coming to a good close down south there. But yeah, that's on my to-do list this week. If I can convince my wife to get outside and help me with that drone flight to put that rope up when it's 101 degrees outside, I'll let you know how that convincing goes. Oh, Luis, you got an HOA. I used to live in an HOA. That's no fun, man. Thankfully, they never really got on me too much. I had a chameleon end fed, and it's that black, stealthy wire. And I never got a letter from them, thank God. But thankfully, it was only visible from the backyard. And unless you were really looking for it, that like stealth black poly rope, it wasn't too bad at all. So I definitely caught a break there. But yeah, HOAs are no fun. I got other letters about dumb stuff from them, but never about my antennas. What's up, David? Good evening in the UK. All right. I'm going to say, you're probably winding down for the evening. It's 4 o'clock local time here. So we're just getting ready to quit for the day. Oh, yeah, Eric, I know. I just talked to my wife. I said, you better look at the sky when you're coming home here. She's just leaving right now because there look to be a couple of good hailstorms out there. I mean, if we get a hailstorm, we get the moisture, so that's good. And who knows? Maybe I'll get a new roof out of the deal. But yeah, there were some good hailers the other day too. It's kind of in the same place they were the other day. Well, we were up in Monticello eating lunch, which is just northwest of Minneapolis for those folks not in Minnesota. And yeah, we had some storms that just popped up, and KA0 KMJ and I raced back to the cities, staying ahead of those storms because I didn't want to have my car turn into a big golf ball. So we were able to get home in time. It wasn't too bad. But yeah, the Spectrum Analyzer stuff, what's good about this, and again, if you don't have one of these are great. These are just fantastic little tools to play around with. I've been checking some of the spectral purity of some of the radios that I've been getting from some friends of mine and seeing, what's good, what's not good. So that's been really helpful. And of course, once I put my wire dipole back up, I will totally be using, speaking of other things like this, I also have the Nano VNA. These are also wonderful. When you check them against like quality equipment, these things are pretty darn accurate. And the fact that they're dirt cheap is great. The only downside of these, especially the older ones that are like this, they make some new ones that have different screens, is you can't see them for the life of you outside. If you're in sunlight, forget about it. But if you're in the shack doing projects, they work pretty well. In the RSPDX, little box of tricks. Yes. That'll be fun. I've heard nothing but good things about those. So you have to let me know what you think. What are you planning on doing with it, David? Have I used a duplexer? Yes, I've used duplexers before. The Comet CF530C from my ICOM 705. You'd like to have your HF and VHF, UHF antennas connected all the time for convenience. So what's the situation now, Tyler? Like, how do you currently have them routed? That's leading you to think about going for this Comet CF530. So give me some more information. I do have, it's not a duplexer, I do have a switch in here that I have, which is kind of nice. But tell me like your current setup, and then it'll just help me give me a little bit more context. Ah, you have a switch. Okay. Yeah, I have a nice heavy duty switch that I use, but I'm only using it, for one specific type of antenna. So I have two antennas that I use on VHF, which is I have a 2 meter Yagi for 6, and then I have my vertical, which I also use for VHF. So when I want to flip between them, I do have to turn off my APRS eye gate, which is unfortunate, but I just flip it over to the Yagi when I want to do 6 meters, whether it's meteor scatter or tropo or E-skip. And then when I'm done with that, I just flip it back and go to the vertical. But I'm guessing you must have like a shack in the box. David live in a flat, an apartment here in central UK. RSPDX to listen to local stuff. Oh, nice. Yeah, so you can like listen to what's going on around you. Awesome. Yeah, I love being able to see stuff. I mean, once you go to having a waterfall, it's really hard to go back. In fact, I don't like my scanner. I have a scanner. It's actually, yeah, you can see it in the background there. That's the Uniden. Back on the desk there, and all the time I'm like, I wish it had a waterfall or display, because now like once I'm so used to like cruising the spectrum with a waterfall, it's hard on anything to not have it, particularly when you're scanning and want to like check out bands and scan stuff. And yeah, waterfalls are just great for that stuff. How much loss, if any, occurs when using a switch? Very little. There is loss, but it is minuscule. So minuscule, there's really nothing even to be worried about. Typically, it's about 0.2 dB, so you would never notice it. It's just so tiny. So not a lot of loss to worry about in a switch. Obviously, you want to have a good quality switch too, because you can find like plastic switches that are fairly cheap, cheaply made, and then they have like really nice heavy duty ones that are like solid metal, much better. But yeah, about 0.2 dB of loss. Again, you would never be able to tell when you use it. Yeah, I'm actually kind of freezing down here. That's why I got my hands crossed, my arms crossed here. The AC is working overtime. I also got that thing ready for the heat wave. I had to go clean it off, and it's the heat wave is pumping all the time. So it's like the AC is constantly blowing on me. It's actually getting cold down here in the basement. Considering getting one when you build a 6-meter antenna, yeah, that'd be perfect. Again, that's very similar to how I've used mine in the past. I have an offshoot of the G5RV. It's often called the ZS6BKW. It's basically an optimized G5RV that I have hanging way up in the trees at about 60 feet. And yeah, I've done that same thing with that same switch, where I've switched between the wire and a 6-meter Yagi, a 2-element that I have. So just to do comparisons on the antenna on 6 to hear which one sounds better for various signals. So yeah, that would work great. And of course, you can flip them around too. You can flip it and have it be where you're running out to a single antenna, but then you're changing from radio to radio in your shack if you have multiple radios. Now, that does get a little dangerous, because if you don't change the switch properly and make a mistake, that would be bad, right? But you can also like invert the switch and do it that way too. Yes, Jonathan, yeah. It is a little bit easier to say G5RV. I guess that's why everybody wants the short call signs, right? But yeah, I love my ZS6 for what it is, for a multi-band dipole, and any antenna is a compromise in some way. It's a good antenna. I can use it across the 5 bands without a tuner. And other than losing 80, which I could easily bring back if I wanted to, it's a great little antenna. And like any dipole, it's all about how high up you get it in free space, get it away from stuff, and they work pretty well. They're not the best antenna. All right, KM4 HOC. I wonder if I got you in log. I'm going to have to look you up. Thoughts on the Yaesu FTM 500 versus you have the 400? For me, I really haven't been overly impressed with anything Yaesu's been doing recently, because I think like a lot of companies, they're going through supply chain challenges. I mean, every company is. But I would probably still take the 400 over the 500. I mean, I know that everything kind of centers around that AESS and that speaker, and the kind of whatever weirdness they're doing with engineering on creating some cool speaker and audio tricks. But I'd take one of the later model 400s that have where the finals were beefed up with the changing how they ventilate the case out a little bit better than the 500. For the price, I don't see the appeal of the 500. I'm sure it's an okay radio, but I'd still, if it were me, I'd buy a 4, as long as it's a later modeled serial 4. Because some of the early 4s had finals burning out, the heat was building up too much, and that's where you also see some of the cool things they're doing with cooling in those radios. But yeah, I like the 400 better than the 500. And it's the same thing with the FT5. You know, they had supply chain challenges. They got to come up with something new. And what came out was kind of like an FT 3.5. And even that, they had some QC issues at the start with injection molding issues and all that stuff. So, again, I haven't been too impressed with what Yaesu's been doing. But take a look at companies like Kenwood or ICOM. They've been pretty quiet for the most part during this time. So I don't think that their supply chains must be stable enough to like dribble out what they're doing. And maybe they had enough inventory stacked to handle whatever pinch in COVID they had. But now you start to see them talking about what's coming out. So they're not rushing to get stuff out to the market. They're kind of waiting to get stuff figured out, and then it'll be coming out next year, right? Or the year after that. So I appreciate that approach more than like the rush to just have new products out there. But that's my opinion. I'm excited to see what the D75 is all about. I was a D74 owner years ago. And if you recall, Kenwood dropped the D74 and announced it would be going away, and everyone freaked out. And then the used prices on D74 shot through the roof. I sold mine right during that craze. I didn't get crazy money for it, but I basically got out of it like completely for free. Somebody paid me full price what I paid for it like 4 or 5 years ago, which I thought was great. But if I would have held on even another 6 months to 8 months, I probably could have got maybe $800 or $900 out of it, which is crazy. They're a nice radio, but to pay $900 to $1,000 for it, I probably wouldn't. But I'm excited to see what the D75 is going to do. I wish there was a little bit different work to the screen. I'll be curious to see what the screen protector is like, because that thing notoriously got scratched constantly and very easily. And I want to see if they found a way to improve battery life, because if you've used or heard about the D74, the number one thing people will tell you is the battery life stunk, and it did. You almost had to buy an extra battery pack. So they could definitely improve it. But for an APRS portable, not to mention it is tri-band, it's a pretty awesome radio. I mean, the receive capabilities and decoding capabilities of APRS packets on the Kenwood D74 were awesome. I was able to decode weak packets from 80, 90, 100 miles away out in the deserts of Utah and Arizona from digipeters that were on the mountaintops. So it's a pretty good radio. It's definitely can decode stuff even if it's really, really weak. But yeah, that's the thing here is for me, I'm just waiting for ICOM to come out with the next version of the 7300. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm just patiently, anxiously waiting to see what they're going to announce, because, you know, Yaesu did come out and improve the receiver performance with the 710, the DX10, and now it's going to be ICOM's turn to come back and try to hop and leapfrog over Yaesu again. Because ICOM really set the bar with a 7300, and everybody has a 7300. Then Yaesu came back with their hybrid receiver and kind of ate the lunch of ICOM, at least in receiver performance. I cannot stand the UI system of Yaesu. I much prefer the UI of ICOM, or user interface, the menus and the buttons. But now I think ICOM, you know, they're working on it, and they're just going to have to answer back. And this radio's been out for a while now. I still use my 7300, but it's been on the market for quite some time, so it's due. I'm sure it's been made a little bit more complex by COVID and supply chain challenges around the globe. So in the next 1 to 2 years, I would expect to see a new version of the 7300 come out from ICOM. That's just a pure guess, but that'd be my assumption. We'll be seeing that soon. It's going to be the tit for tat between Yaesu and ICOM in that regard. And I hope Kenwood comes back strong in the HF game. I'm glad that they're coming back with the D75. A lot of people thought that Kenwood was getting out completely because they went so quiet. They weren't going to any shows. They weren't saying anything about amateur radio. But you got to remember, Kenwood and amateur radio, that's just a little sliver of their business. That's not even their primary focus. It's just one little part, and probably a small part. What's up, Lionel? Good to see you. And So, they were just focused on their commercial and public safety stuff and making sure that they were meeting the demands of their primary core business, now the non-amateur radio, which I can appreciate, but they're still in there. And I'm glad they're hanging in there because Kenwood makes good stuff. You're right, John. They have made a lot of money on the 7300. The ability to, when this radio came out, I remember it vividly. I probably bought it maybe a year and a half after it came out. What this radio did at that time, you would have to spend $2,000 to like $25,000, $3,000 to get that same type of performance and feature set on some stuff at the time. Like, it was a game changer for an HF radio. Not to mention, it's like everyone's addictive first hit into having an SDR and having a waterfall. And I love that they came out with the sister radio with the 9700. That way it just looks gorgeous on the desk. I thought that was great. But yeah, I think it did a lot for the hobby, and it's such a good price for what you get for performance. One thing where the ICOM 7300 suffers is on received performance, particularly in urban areas. Like, I live in an urban area. Technically, it's suburbs, but it's very packed in, lots of people, lots of noise. And it definitely picks up everything. Now, if I lived out in the country, I'd probably love this radio because it does pick up everything. It's very sensitive in that regard. It's also susceptible to overload from nearby strong signals, which is kind of a bummer. It's one of the downsides, always been a downside. But yeah, I said it's very noisy. If I had a Yaesu radio or a Flex or a non-SDR, I would be much better off because just from the digital noise reduction that Yaesu has, which is great, it's better than what ICOM has, it would be better in an urban area. But this radio I'd still take if I lived out in the country. The FT950 until you drop dead. Well, how long is that going to be, Robert? Hopefully it's not going to be like, 25 years from now. But yeah, the Yaesu FT950, that's a good old radio. Hey, what's going on, Chip? Good to see you in there from Winona. For those folks that, again, hadn't seen the video, take care, John73. Chip there, W0CHP, he's the, lead developer. You want to call it that, Chip? Among others that are pushing forward with that awesome new Pi-Star image that Chip has helped push forward on Pi-Star. So good to see you, Chip. Glad you're able to stop in and say hello. We're just finishing up the workday, asking some questions, answering some stuff, having a chat. The FT70D is coming with you. Oh, David. The FT70D, that's a solid little radio. I've recommended that radio to a lot of folks that are looking for a radio like that with that feature set. FT70. And I'll tell you, if you can you see it back there? Yeah, you can. If you look close behind me, there's a Yaesu VX6 back there. Yaesu made some of the best, most rugged HTs back in the day. Again, I think they've lost their way. I probably wouldn't consider a Yaesu radio ever again, based on some personal experiences of mine. But their old stuff, the old submersible, the VX series, is awesome. I love it. It's a good radio. I can't believe the batteries held up this long. 4-hole devs, Chip. Well, that's a big team there, Chip. You got 4 of you. But well, I suppose maybe there's other projects that have a whole Discord server full, but still 4. Hey, that's something. But yeah, I said good work, my friend, on that. And I said I'm still loving it. And I said getting nothing but positive feedback from folks that are using your new image of Pi-Star. It's awesome. And yeah, Chip doesn't live too far from me. He lives right down the Mississippi River from me here in the Twin Cities. So one of these days we'll meet up. And yeah, you're just down the road from me. So the 756 Pro 2. All right. So now, is it from receiver performance? You like the 756 Pro? Now, is that considering filters, or is that just like raw reception? Or are you taking the filters into account? Because that's one other thing that I think that I would like to see in a refresh 7300 is just like a little bit better filters. They're not bad, but maybe I'm just hoping for too much, and to get really better, solid filters, I'm going to have to step it up to more of a, like what the 756 Pro 2 used to be, right? Like more of that, like contester style radio, much of like what a 7610 is today. Maybe that's what you'd have to go to get better filtering. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's going to be a rough one here today. I wonder, I should take a look at the radar and keep an eye on things. I know that if I start to hear a bunch of banging on the side of my house, I'll know the hailstorm is here. All the above, lower noise floor as well. That's my only knock, is just the noise floor. And I have some noisy neighbors. Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's, I have neighbors next to me. If you want to talk about the best and worst neighbors together like this, I have a story for you. My immediate neighbors next to me, they are wonderful people. They moved in just before we did into this neighborhood because we came from Denver. They came from LA. And super nice people. Like, they've let me go through their house and direction find RFI, and I've shut breakers off in their house and all this stuff. They're great. But here's the bad side. They have a security system. All their security cameras are PoE injected, and they have their little NVR maxed out. It's just some cheap NVR from China. And so they have every single camera that you can. I think it's like 20 cameras, maybe 25. They have cameras on the outside of their house and the inside of their house. The problem is that as you insert more cameras, the power supply on the NVR gets noisier and noisier and noisier. And as it sends the power down the Ethernet, it radiates in pulses. And they have a big bundle of Ethernet going right up the middle of their house. It acts like a massive vertical antenna. And it just pulses, noise, broad spectrum noise. So they have told me that, like, if I, obviously I have to foot the bill, which I totally get. I said I could probably help myself out by if I just individually PoE injected maybe 10 of those with 10 different just single injectors with their own power supply. I could probably bring the noise down to where I couldn't hear it. It's probably intermixed in the noise floor, and that's all that I would need. Because maybe I sacrifice an FT8 contact that's really tough here and there, but I mean, it's bad. When at certain frequencies, it's like 10 over S9, 20 over S9. It's bad. And I've also tracked down some of those wireless charging pads. They had some very cheap wireless chargers for their phones, and that's one of the things I tracked down when they let me into their house to turn the breakers off. Is I had this nasty, nasty pulsing, very broad banded across VHF and even chunks of UHF. Same kind of style of noise. If you've never heard a wireless charger, it sounds like a constant swooshing sound. Maybe some of you have wireless charging pads in your house. If you ever hear the noise, it's very pronounced. They all sound the same. It just says, and that's the pulsing from that pad. Even if there's nothing on it, it'll still pulse. And if you turn those, I have one that's like a stand. My wife had one. I threw it away on her. It looks like a triangle, and you set your phone on top of it. If I turn that pad where the actual charger is, I can direct the noise and make it worse or go away and get a little bit better. It has directivity to it. But I found one of those in their house, and we tracked it down, and they were nice enough to throw that away and buy another one. I told them, just don't buy it on Amazon. Just go to Best Buy, get something that is probably certified for consumer use and is actually, properly filtered and doesn't sound terrible. So they did do that. So that's the good side. The bad side is they have 25 cameras with a commercial grade system that does not have shielded cat cable. The good side is that they're very amenable to trying to help me, because as they say, they go, we don't want to ruin your hobby or what you do for fun. We want to work with you to try to figure stuff out. And I did end up causing their lights to flicker. If any of you have ever suffered from dimmer switches are notorious for letting RF get into them. And at first, they thought their house was haunted for a few days because they couldn't figure out why the dimmer switch that controlled their lights in their dining room were going on and off and on and off and dim and up and dim and up. And then they go, wait a minute, I bet it's the neighbor on his radio. And they texted me and I go, yeah, I was just on the radio. So that's what it was. So we were able to get that one figured out, and I bought them a new dimmer switch. So hopefully you all have neighbors like that. Not that they have tons of noise or spewing, but they're not going to shut the door in your face. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Although, believe me, I still wish I lived out in the middle of nowhere, like every other ham probably wishes, on a hilltop with nobody around me for a mile, all that stuff. But They are pretty good neighbors. It's hard to complain, but again, the neighborhood's going to look at me crooked when I put up my hex beam. I know it. The folks driving by on their Mercedes are going to give me the stink eye. It just is what it is. I'll just tell them it's like the world's coolest clothes hanger to dry my clothes off. It's eco-friendly. I'm not using a dryer. I'm hanging them on that antenna over there. I'm trying to be green. That's what I'll tell them. What's going on, Nick? K2NGX. Let's see. K2, 2 land, assuming you're in the right region. Let me guess. Just by density alone, New York. New York State, Nick? Yes, no? I wonder if that's right. Just taking a wild guess. Every time I see 2 land, just from density alone, I'm like, it's probably New York. New Jersey, well, it's one and the same, right? I don't know how New Jersey folks feel about that, but pretty darn close. If you're in northern New Jersey, might as well consider it New York. But I will say good pizza out there. No question about that. Any other questions people have? Ask me anything ham radio related or things you want to just vent on. I can tell you something interesting that just happened today over my lunch break. You may have caught the video about the Shortwave Modernization Coalition. Oh, what a great face that was. I'm getting a phone call coming in. So it'll come back in just a second. All right, K2LRX says hi, RS. Awesome. So over my lunch break, have you all seen that Shortwave Modernization Coalition? Basically, it's the FCC proposed rules that the fintech space wants to do with HF. If you have, just drop a comment. Let me know if you've seen that. If you haven't, go watch it. But the reason I bring it up is over lunch today, I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about that video. So they're going to be doing a story about that. And they're talking to me and some other hams out there, and they're gonna do a story probably sometime next week. So I was able to do the interview over lunch today, which was great, and just kind of gave my perspective. And I said I'll be curious to see what comes out about it because I said you talk for 45 minutes with a reporter. I've done a lot of interviews, just the nature of my job, and 45 minutes of chattering away, and they use like 2 sentences, right? So we'll see. I'll be very curious to read the story and see what it's about. Let's see here. All right, a lot of people have seen it. Am I on DMR often? As Nick asked. Yes, I am. I'm usually at home. I only go into the office 1 day a week typically, so I'm in the shack most days all day long. And I usually have my Motorola radio here on and listening. I'm usually listening to Minnesota State 3127 on Brandmeister and 31272 Minnesota Metro on Brandmeister. Those are the 2 talk groups that I use. Particularly the 31272 is where you'll find me rag chewing the most. How do you build an All-Star node? Boy, I don't know a ton about All-Star. I've only played around with it as an end user. I haven't actually built one, but it can't be a ton of help there. But I know there's a lot of documentation out there where you can find it. I just haven't done a ton with All-Star. But All-Star is pretty nice. I mean, it's one of those misconception things, back to the DMR video, right, where people say, well, DMR is just a bunch of internet links and VoIP. Why don't you just get on Skype and talk? We've had, analog linking forever, and that's what All-Star is. It links together analog stuff, and that's not necessarily new. But, yeah, I haven't done a ton with All-Star. That's right, Lionel. You get 1 sentence in. Whatever their favorite 2 or 3 sentences you say is what ends up in there, depending on what the angle of the story is, and it may not be the main points you conveyed. So we'll see. How is the radio still working in the Tesla? Anything I would do differently? Still working great. In the early days of the Tesla, people thought, oh, you can't use a radio and that you're going to fry the computer or cause all kinds of problems. It's totally not the case. I know people that operate HF out of their Teslas. I've had my 50-watt mobile in there for what now, 5 years, 6 years, since 2018, and no problems. I wouldn't do anything different. I wish there was more mounting options, but maybe I would look at a detachable faceplate or a way that I could mount the radio in the back trunk, which is a lot of what you see in public safety installations for Teslas, and then have a control head just in the front and a more clean installation. But cutting through and doing like getting into the cabin and going through stuff, there's wiring everywhere, and you're so nervous to like touch any of the wiring. And it's not because I'm worried about getting shocked. It's all low voltage stuff, but it's still, you're like, if I just make this one problem, this wire is going to cause an issue somewhere, because it's so wired in Tesla. So ripping apart stuff's kind of cumbersome. It's not like you're just punching a hole through a firewall and connecting it to a battery terminal. But yeah, it hasn't damaged the car, hurt the car. Yeah, I said I'm nervous though, because they're changing to a different voltage in their accessory battery in the future. So it means that running a mobile in a Tesla in the future might be really difficult. Not impossible. It's just going to take some more ingenuity to do it, because they're getting away from 12-volt batteries. So that's going to be interesting. Poskeg. Oh man, Poskeg. I love that, man. I grew up listening to those pagers on scanners and listening to all the tones get fired off for pagers. In fact, I was able to figure out some of the pagers in my city growing up, and I'd call and leave pages to random people just to hear my voice over the system. Yeah, I played around with it here at home. I've used Pi-Star for that. It works great. It's fun to kind of play with. Good afternoon, AI7HE. What's going on? So much data. Yes, Lionel. So much data, so much wiring, so much electric everything in an electric car. Who would have thought? If money was no option, Adam asks, what would be your HT mobile and base radio? Well, I think that's tough to answer, because it really depends on what you're interested in, right? Like what you would like to do. There's so many different ways to take it. Because if you ask me, like, what's my ideal money's no object POTA radio, that's different. If you ask me what kind of car it's going in, that might change my answer. But I think generally, as a generalized answer, I would say for an HT, wow. I would take a Motorola APX 8000 XE. And I would also buy probably the Kenwood D75A along with that. That would probably take care of my HT needs beyond what I already have, which is the Motorola R7, because I got to have a DMR radio. See, I've already got problems where I'm like, I need multiple radios for multiple things. So this is my DMR radio. Speaking back to my monitoring DMR. This is a fantastic DMR radio. I'd want the P25 of the APX, and it's quad banded, so we'll do that. Mobile radio, I'd probably, again, multiple mobiles. I would have a Motorola installation, like a 5550 for DMR. And I'd probably still keep my D710 that I have. I love that radio. If you have a D710, you know, because they're great. They're fantastic radios. It's just one of those radios I'll never sell, because you can't find them, and if you can, they're super expensive. I hope they come out with another D710 with like a color screen, and they're probably going to add D-Star to it, which I'm not a D-Star fan, but that'd be cool. If it had DMR on it, I would die. Base radio, and that gets a little bit more interesting. So a pure base radio, pure HF, for how I operate, I'd probably buy the top of the line Flex radio is probably what I'd get. It's just really hard to want to buy that right now, because the 7300 does everything I want it to do and needed to do. It's not perfect, but it's like I could spend $990 on this, right? Or spend $6,000. It's just like the proposition of money in my current situation, right? I'm like, it's not worth $5 extra grand, you know. Like, it's great radio, it's better than what I have, but it's not $5,000 better. But again, money's no object, right? So I'd take a Flex, top of the line Flex would probably be my choice. I wouldn't mind an Anon radio, but the Anons are kind of technical, and you got to really spend a lot of time messing around with drivers and such. And I'd probably take the Flex with the additional, what do they call it, Maestro screen, where you can take it around with you in the house, so you can leave your radio set in the shack and then have like a portable radio. You just carry it around with you and use it with a headset. That's pretty cool. 7550, Nick, yeah. 7550 is a good radio. You know, the R7 is only incrementally better. It's pretty darn close. The 7550, especially now with the used prices, with the R7 being out, and they're going to flood the market, the 7550 is a good option. It's a good little radio. And DMR, the ever polarizing DMR. If you're a DMR user, let me know in the comments, because I find that with DMR, you know, it's either one or the other. You either love it or you hate it. I tend to find that not a lot of people are in the middle. There is no kind of like, DMR. Either people are really into it, and the ones that are into it, I find are typically, not always, but a lot of people come from an IT background that are into DMR, which makes total sense. If they hate it, they're probably, again, really not into computers of any kind. And they're like not into that. This is a technical hobby after all, but yeah, code plugs are no fun. Passive dimmer, yes. I said there are special dimmers you can buy that are actually made for commercial applications that are designed to withstand even high RF environments, like in certain laboratory settings that you can buy from Lutron. So we had to get those like special order. The programming, David, yes. Code plugs. Who doesn't love a good code plug? I mean, if you want the set it, forget it, easy stuff, I mean, that's C4FM Wires X. It's locked down. There's a lot you can't do. There's not a lot of tinkering opportunity within that ecosystem. D-Star, I don't like for its voice quality, and the registration process, at least years ago, was really tough and really not at all intuitive. But oh, Chip's bringing up the M17. We're going to get there. And then DMR, DMR took off once they started importing radios, and you could play around with digital on the cheap in the early days. And then I got into DMR probably in 2013, somewhere in there. But I hope, this is the Chip's point, and Nick, I'll come back to your question. For M17, I hope M17 is successful. I really do. It's open source, through and through. I really hope it's successful. I'm just trying to figure out from a business perspective how it becomes successful, particularly from a hardware standpoint. Like, that's the tricky part. I don't know what the incentive is and how they're going to try to get adoption and ramp that up, just given that manufacturers are tied into these ecosystems already in various ways. But I really do hope M17 is successful. And I said I talked to a few of those M17 guys that lead that, and they're super nice guys. And I wish that whole community nothing but the best. Because, I mean, as much as I like DMR, and I like it because I like learning more about the commercial sector, that people that do it professionally, what they deal with on a daily basis, I would truly like to see a straight open source. I just don't know what's the roadmap to success. Might be a good thing for a video in the future. The Flex 65, yeah, man, it's good. And you got the cool iPad app. That's a really great thing. But yeah, the 7300, that's like the gateway drug. That is the gateway drug radio. Ham Radio Deluxe is not bad, but boy, there's a lot of stuff in HRD these days, and they've certainly gotten expensive what they charge for it. Yeah, HRD is not a bad option. I do use N1MM for some of that stuff, but yeah, I mean, HRD is not a bad choice. Anxiety attacks of DMR. That's funny. People get anxiety just thinking about code plugs. Even I do. Like, I do a lot of code plug work. I help a lot of people with code plugs, although I'm getting less and less to the I'll do it for you, and I'll just say I'll teach it to you, because learning to do it yourself is the way to go. If you rely on other people all the time, the chance of you enjoying it and being successful are probably less. So I really try to advocate for teaching people how to do it. It's tedious. It just is. If you can find a base starter plug for your Geo, you're much better off. Or someone's done the big heavy lift for you and gotten all the channels in, right? And then you can just org them how you want and lay out the interface how you want. But if you're starting from scratch, it's going to take some time, and it's just tedious. And it's like, old school data entry. It's tough, but that's the commercial world. We just live in it, right? Okay, back to your point, Nick, about Poxscape pagers on Pi. How far does it go? I said I haven't done distance testing, so I can't really speak to that. I've just messed with it like in the shack, right? Like in the house, like really close together. I have not tried to attach it to the antenna on my roof and see how far it can trip a pager, down the road or whatever. Although that might be a fun video. I haven't done distance testing like I did with my hotspot. But my hotspot, I can give you that. I had a video years ago on that when I lived in Denver. My hotspot with line of sight, UHF, what is it? I forget how many milliwatts it is, but it's less than a half a watt. With my high gain antenna at 40 feet in the window, that went about a mile. But again, that was a unique case. 3 weeks for the code plug, Nick? Yep. I mean, it definitely takes some time. Jeff saying, I got a UB5R. Boy, do you have fun with cops. Honda Indy drivers. I'm not sure quite what that means. But I was some surprised because it seems like every public safety agency, you don't want to interfere with them. Unless you're talking about ham radio cops. But so much public safety now is gone to trunk digital systems. Although I'm still shocked that Chicago is still using analog UHF. Like, it's the home of Motorola, and they're still using analog UHF. I just don't get it, because pretty much everybody is on a P25 system by now. Oh, let's see. Don, good to see you, my friend. Hopefully you're not getting too much of these storms, although I think you're coming your way in Sibley County. The 7300 and the 97, it's a great combo, man. I love both of them. And then, of course, yeah, you got the XTS 2500 for P25, which is starting to grow a little bit here. And I think that's just a proliferation of some cheaper radios coming out of public safety service, right? Don, you know what I'm talking about. P25 radios, like the old XTS stuff, you're finding them more and more on eBay. And you're finding them at pretty darn good prices. So we're starting to see more people play around with P25 and put on P25 machines here in the Twin Cities. It's certainly not as busy as DMR, but people are starting to play around. Yes, that's what I'm thinking of. The 10 milliwatt. Thank you, Chip. I was like, how powerful was that again? Yes. Yeah, great. I mean, yeah, Don, it's just the same thing with DMR. Like, the reason DMR took off the way it did with DMR Mark and Brandmeister and all that stuff, like, it was the proliferation of cheap handhelds, from the Kinect System days. And then it just kept going from there to the Anytone and TYT and you name it. Again, there's two competing strategies in digital, which I think is so fascinating to see how they play out. You have the Yaesu strategy of build it and they will come, which means giving out cheap repeaters, although the repeaters weren't that great to begin with. They were 2 radios in a box. And give out those repeaters at a discounted price to clubs, put the repeaters on the air, and then all the members will buy radios that are more expensive to get on the repeater. So you're subsidizing the repeater, and the radios are still kind of expensive. And then you got DMR, which is the inverse. Cheap radios, people have all these radios, then they go, hey, let's put up the repeater. So it's been really fascinating to see those two things play out over the years. I have a GMRS license, Jeff, believe it or not. I have both, although I got my GMRS license and I got on a local repeater here. The first day I got my license in the ULS, I gave my call sign and then I expediently got kicked off. I got told to bug off. And that was the end of my GMRS experience in Minnesota. So, Adam, when do you think radios will start to develop modern interfaces similar to phones? That's a good question. I'll be curious if Chip has any insight to his opinion. I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be a long time before we even get close. I am hopeful that younger hams today will push for that and push us in that direction. But at the same time, so many folks are tied. It's just a very slow hobby, right? I mean, just take a look at, software that we use or websites out there. Like, it's so dated. And a lot of it just has to do with the demographics of the hobby. So do I think like something like that could catch fire really fast? No. And that's why I think it may be a while. But I'm hopeful that the younger hams that are filing in will have an appetite for that. And if they have an appetite for it, there's a market for it, and then companies will make those things. You're right. USB-C is still coming out. And my thing on USB-C is, I mean, I'm not as crazy about it as some people are like, I have to have USB-C in my radio. And I'm like, that's great. Like, I think it's handy. It's really useful to have it. But like, I'm like 95% of the time still totally fine dropping my radio in the charger and like want to drop in charger. But it's nice to have the option when I need to in a pinch to plug it into USB-C. Although I saw a recent radio from Baofeng where the USB-C was in the bottom of the battery and there was no protective cover. It was open. And I was like, that's not good. Like, if you even set it like on a wet table, like you're exposing the port to water, it wasn't a good design. But I'm expecting too much from expecting a good design. But yeah, I think that it's going to be slow, unfortunately. But I'm hopeful that younger hams will kind of push the envelope a little bit. Yeah, Don, I don't blame you. I've heard so many horror stories of people burning up those repeaters in the early days and then being blamed for burning them up. Yeah, it was an interesting strategy, and to see the dueling between the two is fascinating. I do own, I don't own all Motorola radios. I do have a lot of them. I own some, but I definitely don't own all. I wish I owned all. But no, I have a ton of stuff. I have my Anytones. I have 3 Anytone radios. I run Anytone in my car. I have 2 878s here. I have my Yaesu VX6. I have probably 3 or 4 Retevis radios. I have one, don't tell anybody, Baofeng UV5R. But here's my thing with that. Here's the caveat. I actually don't use it. This is true. I just give it to my kid to use. And it's his throwaway radio, and he throws it around the house, and we talk on like FRS. So it's that kind of a radio. It's mostly for him. Although when I saw Don, who's in the chat here, we were at a Hamfest in Des Moines. Don may have not recalled seeing it, but my little one was carrying one of my 878s, dropping it all over the concrete floor at the Hamfest, which it survived beautifully, by the way. Thank you, Anytone, for that. But yeah, I have a variety of radios, but my most used, because I'm a heavy DMR user, is certainly Motorola. 2 meter in the UK is quiet. Really? 70 centimeters is near extinct. Well, is there like repeater activity on 70 centimeter or even those quiet? But yeah, I mean, repeaters have gone quiet here too, David. Like, they're not like they were even back in the 90s. I mean, and I think a lot of that has to do with the cell phone. Like, I can remember when I was a kid in the 90s and I wasn't a ham yet, and neither were my parents. Like, we would use CB radio to like say, hey, don't forget to pick this up at the grocery store. Now all that's on the phone, right? So the utility of it has worn away, and you don't even see phone patches anymore because everyone's got a cell phone. And so a lot of that has slowly come down, and all that jazz. But it's definitely gotten a lot more quiet on repeaters everywhere that I've been in the U.S. and since I've been a ham, and even listening to them back when I was a little kid. Yeah, I think, Chip, you're right. It's gonna slowly. It's not going to happen in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's going to be a while. But again, it's a slow change of the guard in ham radio, a slow change to the guard. So it'll happen. It just won't be as fast as, other technology and other parts of our culture. Yeah, I would love to see an updated 7100. That radio is underappreciated. It's a great little radio. And I agree. I would love a colored screen. I think that would do really well. That's a cool little radio. It's an ugly little bugger, but it's a good little radio. No R7 Motorola. Yes, of course, Don. I have my R7 Motorola. Cells or hotspots? What do you mean by that, Nick? And by the way, we're coming up on 5 o'clock Central, so I'm going to cut off at 5 o'clock because I have to talk with the wife here. She is now home. But yes, I said I have that's what's next to me here. Because again, their question was, do I listen to DMR? And I do all the time. I hear Don out there occasionally, who's in the chat. So again, this is my Motorola R7. It's a good little radio. Again, this is the latest, DMR offering from Motorola. They're nice. I don't like the speaker mic with this radio, which is a the 500 RSM. I don't like that RSM 500. I don't like it. It is way too sensitive of a mic element in there, and for how I would use it in ham radio. Oh, yeah. Cells or hotspots. That's right. Yeah, I said, repeaters, it's funny, because there's probably just a handful of repeaters in the metro here in the Twin Cities that are used at any regularity. The other ones do get used, but they only get used during the net. That's it. Like, all of a sudden, there's like 30 people that come out of the woodwork for the net, and then you never hear them talk the rest of the week on the repeater. So it's like a gathering place for the club or for the net on their machine, and they all go away and don't talk on it. But we use DMR here, and Don can attest to this. We use DMR pretty often here in Minnesota. We do rag chew for an hour or two, and put use into the repeaters and into the networks, because that's what it's all about, right? Getting on the radio, having fun. So we definitely do use them, and we have some good wide coverage analog machines here in Minnesota too that are great. Yeah, Motorola is always good all around if you bear the price. It's definitely a good radio. Oh yeah, 1960s, man. I can't even imagine. I mean, I imagine just going back that far. I wasn't even a thought yet. In the early days, back before I was born, that just the even reduction in RFI from junk, all the stuff we have now that emits and spews junk. I imagine that you could hear all kinds of stuff. Not to mention there was more stuff to listen to on the bands back then. So yeah, I can totally see that. Hey, what's going on? N4BUT. What's going on, Nick? Good to have you. Yeah, Motorola's good stuff, Nick. A lot of people run them up here. You know, Don's a Motorola head there in the chat. It seems like it's a Midwest thing, though. I will say that. I don't know if Don's ever noticed this, but like me living in two different parts of the country, in the Midwest, anywhere in and around Chicago, like Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota. I can't speak to like Michigan, Indiana, but a lot of Motorola gear. You go to Hamfest, you'll find lots of old Motorola public safety stuff like being sold. It's just like a cultural thing. When I lived in Colorado, almost no Motorola. So I don't know if it's just because like it's such a Midwest thing, big Midwest company based in Chicago. I don't know. But yeah, here it's such a huge thing. A lot of people have Motorola gear up here. And again, it's not just the Midwest, but it seems more pervasive up here. No, they are not all on Brandmeister, Nick. Our talk groups are split between two different networks. We do have one talk group, which of course is Minnesota 3127, that is bridged between two different networks, so that way they're shared on that one talk group. But we have the majority of our stuff is Brandmeister in the state. We do have a few that are on the K4 USD network on a separate system, and then we also have another network that is just for MCOM, OXCOM folks. It's like a private DMR system just for emergency communications purposes for like our county officials that are also hams. Those systems are there, but they're only used for like OXCOM stuff. Motorola and Kenwood are popular for public safety in Indiana. That's not surprising me. Motorola is usually the big kahuna across the board. I don't see a ton of Kenwood here. It's almost always Motorola. Out in Colorado, it was Motorola and Harris were kind of the two big ones that you'd see a lot out there. I'm looking at some of the Kenwood stuff. Some of the Kenwood, is it the V series, is getting some really good reviews. And it's not crazy priced either. They're kind of big and bulky. And I'm talking about the new ones that do like P25 and DMR all in one. It's kind of like the competition to the 8000 series for Motorola. I'm seeing some good stuff about that. Yeah, Nick, if you come into 31272 on Brandmeister or 3127 Minnesota State, you'll catch me there. You'll catch Don there in the chat. Again, I'm monitoring pretty regularly, especially during the daytime. If I'm not in a meeting or doing something for work, if I'm just working away, I'm usually monitoring and chit-chatting when I can, depending on my work schedule. So evenings, I'm pretty tied up with the little one, but during the daytime, I'm out there quite a bit. So any last burning questions from the group? Thanks for coming out to hang out this afternoon. Kind of an impromptu hangout. All right, Chip73, my friend. Glad you're able to tune in for a bit. Again, we're going to be doing the same thing. Yeah, come over to Mid-Metro, man. We'll chat. I said, I'm over there quite a bit. It'd be good to talk to you. And I said, my goal this week, again, get the wire back up. That's goal number one for me. I got to get the wire back up. I'm having withdrawals on the whole not having a true HF setup. And after that, I got to do some work on some of my coax. I need to go do some turns, make an air choke. That's going to be another thing we're going to do. Yes, Nick, Chip there, W0CHP. That is the one with the Pi-Star upgrade who has done all the fantastic work on that custom Pi-Star image. That is one and the same. That is the man right there. So that's what I'm really focused on this week. I'm going to go upstairs, talk to the wife before I get in any more trouble, go make dinner. So again, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I appreciate all the comments, all the likes, you hanging out, spending time, chatting radio. And again, everything you do, I said here on YouTube, or if you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or any of that stuff. So I appreciate all of you. Have a good night. 7-3, and we'll catch you again next time.